the Bee Dance podcast. The
Okay.
Bee Dance podcast.
It is this V-Dance podcast, guys.
They are in the state of inertia or strategic laziness, if you will. Get anything and chase this guy forever. The guy cannot make it based on assets. What's the point? Let's settle on something.
Yeah.
But again, as I said, maybe 20%.
Something is not going good, right?
Yes.
Well,
So it's like we were, talking about this.
sad life.
So we were talking about.
Used to do stuff by themselves, and they're thinking, okay, I can manage it. Like I can just whatever. Like I owe like 100k, 200k, but I still wanna figure out how I can manage
The
it.
imperfect action is much better than perfect inaction. IRS operates. Now I'm going to help people fight the IRS because I know the inner workings of the IRS. I know how they handle the process the cases. So that's what our focus here, to defend you. You won't even have to speak to the IRS, and protect your assets like the beeswax as they protect your function.
Like for people, hey, get started where you are. You know, there's gonna be a different reality when you're just doing the first step, basically.
Tell us why is B-Dance? What's the idea behind B-Dance?
Yeah, so when I was in the 8th grade, I think it was in the 8th grade in the world literature class, we were covering one of the literary works we were covering was Alan Edgar Poe, The Golden Beetle. And I thought like that work was fascinating. The guy was like really messing with the entomology. And I remember reading that word entomology and I'm like, what's this? So I had like to open a dictionary and see what entomology means, and it basically says the study of insects. So that was my original exposure to the world of insects. Then you know, like we were reading Kafka Metamorphosis, about like how one guy started like changing, transforming into insects and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So that was another mental thread about insects. And then, you know, like my mother's uncle in the village like I'm from in the Kalush region had 40 beehives. So like he had
that's a lot.
Yeah, so he had like pretty big production there, and I remember buying honey from him, and then people in the village were buying honey, and I remember what was really cool about the guy. He had like really cool net, and then you know he would work with the bees. I knew he works with the bees, and he talked how therapeutic they are, and about the wholesome effects of bee therapy. He said like he even did things for people when people like were suffering from some nervous conditions. They would like lie over there in a kind of like box, and there would be surrounded by bees, and bees making sound and buzzing, and you know that person would be receiving therapy to calm their nervous system. And I was like, wow, this stuff is amazing. So that was like my early childhood exposure to the topic of the bees. But then, like much later in life, when I went to university in North Carolina, I had to do a science requirement. And I chose entomology because I wanted to learn more about insects. And so like it was a fascinating summer course. So I remember we had to collect different insects and then really understand the parts such as thorax, abdomen, all the parts to understand how they operate, how the body, the insect's body works and functions. You know, different pheromones. For example, you know these bugs, light bugs in the summertime that sparkle, that make light.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't understand how the process was happening. Well, it turns out it's a part of their mating season, and they release pheromones, which is sexual hormones, like to attract each other in mating.
That's really cool. Like nature is amazing. Wow.
Yeah, and what's interesting at that time, we lived in North Carolina, in Charlotte area. Eventually, we moved to Columbia, South Carolina. In Columbia, there is the Kangaroo National Park that has 0.5% of the old growth forest. But an interesting thing about that park that it has those the light bug show. So once a year in the summer, like kind of like late summer, people can go in the evening, late evening, and you walk down the path, and it's well lit. It's like as if somebody put little lamps to light your path. So you're kind of walking, and it's like the path is well lit by these synchronous fireflies. Well, there are a lot of fireflies, but there are only 3 types of fireflies capable of synchronous lighting. When they synchronize their lighting, and it seems as if the lamp was shining on your path. So like Kangaroo National Park is one of them. So that's another connection with insects.
Okay.
So like and then so that's on the entomology side. Then on the tax side, I remember I was taking different classes, continuing education classes for my CPA license. And in 2018 in December, I got in touch with one guy into listening to Stu Sobel. Stu Sobel was a giant of a man in the tax field.
Okay.
He worked
I heard the name, honestly. Even me at the time never being in this field, so I heard somewhere.
Yes, so he was like from Indiana, and you know like he worked for the tax service for the IRS for 30 years. Then he retired from the IRS, and after 30 years, think about it, the guy works 30 years for the IRS as one of their officers, pretty high-ranking officer solving different tax business cases. Then he retires from 30 years of career, and then he creates the second career path for himself. He's like, okay, I know how the IRS operates. Now I'm going to help people fight the IRS because I know the inner workings of the IRS. Yeah. I know how they handle the process, the cases. So he became this leading authority in the tax resolution field. And in 2018, when I took 8 credits from his classes. I was so fascinated and fired up, and I'm like, that's when I knew I don't want to do traditional accounting. I want to do something cooler, kind of like tax resolution, like this Stu Sobel guy does. He passed away. He passed away like 5 or more years ago, but you know his legacy, his like astounding legacy, really inspired me. So that was December 2018. But then I remember telling my wife in 2020 I was working controller in South Carolina, and I remember once I was in January 2020. I took another tax resolution guy by Mr. Green, and that guy also encourages accountants to get away from tax preparation into something more exciting, such as resolving tax cases for the clients. So that was another point fueling that desire to go into that field. And I remember after listening to that tax course, I was on the way to work January 2020. And it was like right before like the major COVID pandemic. I'm calling my wife. I'm like, honey, I think I really want to go this tax resolution route. And she's like, okay, so like do it. Like it sounds like a good idea. But then then you know like COVID came, and during COVID I had a chance to consult businesses on financing, government financing such as PPP loans, COVID loans. So that's when I ventured off in my business after 7 years with different CPA firms like Ernst & Young, some regional CPA firms, family offices. 7 years into my career, I went into business for myself because COVID started, and I saw that avenue of going into consulting. But still, I wasn't in tax resolution yet. Then come June 2021, I learned about the guy called Michael Rosbrook.
Okay.
This Michael Rosbrook, for 15 years, was in the tax resolution field. He built the practice from the scratch until it was like 23 million. Then he retired. From then he started a coaching business to help people accountants and lawyers who want to go and do something exciting like solving clients' cases. So I got really excited about his training. And then in October 2021, I founded Achieve Tax Relief with the doing business as the B Dance. So that's when I actually registered the entity. I had a different entity before then in April 2021 called Kokla CPA, for
Yeah.
consulting. Before that, I was working as a sole proprietor consulting. But in 2021 October, that's where I registered a separate entity for achieve tax relief. And then, you know, I kept up with, so like my main field has been consulting, but gradually I was taking some tax resolution cases, especially, you know, on the like state level and New York City level, resolving people's cases. I remember I did like installment agreement and started getting my feet more and more wet in the tax resolution business. So then I remember first I was talking about entomology and bees and all of that.
Yeah.
And then at some point, like I think it was in 2020, I read something about the article called the bee dance. And it said, well, you know, do you know how the bees actually collect nectar? They actually do, once they discover the source of nectar, they produce an elaborate kind of dance. And the trajectory of that dance points to the direction where the bees should fly, and it points to the distance and to the quality of nectar and things like that. And that's where, you know, those neurons, the neurons that fired and gave me the idea of the bee dance being like a very cool idea for this business, especially since I don't want to be like a traditional boring tax service. I want to really to render the idea to people that taxes can be cool, especially, you know, like when you work it right. If you you're not fearful of the tax code of the IRS, but you look at the tax code as an investment guidebook versus some like scary big book. But you really learn to leverage it. You discover the source of nectar, and then you can lead clients, if you will, to that source of nectar, tailoring a strategy specifically to them. So my last name is Chochle, which means like ladle or scoop in Polish or Western Ukrainian dialects. So in order for honey to be of use to you, if it's just sitting in the jar, it's just sitting in the shelf, you're not getting benefits from the wholesome properties of the honey. So for it to give you benefits, you need to have some sort of utensil, like scoop, for example, put it in the scoop, and then apply it in the right dosage. And then it will make an effect in a particular scenario with the correct amount and so on. So my goal as a tax advisor and tax resolution expert is to really point people in that direction and say, look, let's design the strategy tailor-made in your case. Let's get the inside scoop, tailor the strategy, and solve your case.
I like it. Hey, I just like think that's it sounds like a calling or part of the calling that you have, and when you have calling, you are passionate about it, and you have the charisma, and you have the heart just to do the things, and I'm excited. I'm excited about that. You know, when you're talking about things like bees and making connection with taxes, which is like, okay, where is bees, where is taxes? It's like, bro, it's like totally different things, but yeah, you are able to connect. There's something about it.
So most people like, the bee dance in taxes, what the heck? What are you trying to say?
It's kind of crazy, but yeah, nobody is saying it's gonna be kind of boring, right? Taxes. Interesting. Okay, so I just want to ask you a couple things. Let's say for people who are interested in getting free eventually from their debts and stuff that they're going through. It's kind of you just want to have your life, you want to have your time. You want to have this inner peace with the...
Because the IRS is choking you, grabbing you by the throat. You cannot breathe, you cannot really enjoy your life because the IRS or state and municipal authority is like choking you.
Yes, so like for a person who kind of, let's say, person used to do stuff by themselves and they're thinking, okay, I can manage it. Like I can just whatever, like I owe like 100K, 200K, but I still wanna figure out how I can manage it. So what would you say to those kind of people who
Well, you
many
see, going
visitors.
back to the example of the bee colony, any average bee colony has about like 60,000 bees. So like my hometown of Kalish has 60,000 population. It's kind of like the city of Rock Hill in South Carolina. So like 60,000 bees. But then what people don't realize that on any given time, only 16 to 20% are active foraging and gathering nectar. Only 16 to 20%. So we get back to the 20-80 principle that usually 20% of people do 80% of work for any type of organization, 20% of people will be top performers and so on.
Yeah.
So like what happens with the other 80%? They are in the state of inertia or strategic laziness, if you will.
Okay.
So when you're trying to solve it on your own, it's like you're in that 80% component. You're in inertia. And why you're in inertia? Because in order for us to really solve something, we need to have the path of clarity. We need to have the path of agency, pathway thinking, hope, and empowerment. But if I'm sitting in this segment, in this 80% segment, I'm in the state of inertia and I don't have clarity. And if I don't have clarity, I don't know exactly what it's gonna take. I'm gonna procrastinate naturally because my mind is not gonna move in the direction of solving it as long as I don't have clarity. So like what happens with the 16 to 20% bees? Those 60 to 20% bees have laser focus. They work like crazy for the entire month because that's the average lifespan of a bee. 1 month. What happens? These active bees, the 16 to 20% active bees, work like crazy for the entire month, and then they die, and then no other bees that were so-called strategically lazy bees replace the ones who died to keep that 20 to 80% ratio. So you see, in order to have that laser focus and work like crazy, you really need to have like a very clear path to reaching your objective. Well, it's like you consider somebody who wants to become a beekeeper. It doesn't happen overnight. You need to have training. You really need to get into it, and then you have better path, and you can have better sales. You can benefit more people with that honey. So likewise, unless you are trained in the area, it would be hard for you to have clarity. On the other hand, I was describing a long path for me to get to the point where I am, to conceive that idea, to understand I really want to do it. As you said, I'm really passionate about it. Once you have that, you really want to grab the case and solve it because that's your passion. That's what you love doing. So you have a clear path, pathway thinking, knowledge of the tax law for the decade of practicing tax service.
Side question: how many laws there in the tax field that you need to know in order to solve the problem? Let's say.
Well, just the income. There are different tax sections. Such as, for example, even the first section of the tax code is like over 1,500 articles, 1,500 sections just dealing with the income section. But then you're dealing with different penalties and professional responsibilities. That's already in 6,000. That's already in the 6,000 range. But if you talk just about the income tax component segment of the tax code, it's like 1,500 plus sections.
That's a lot. That's a lot. Like for people, let's say who think they can manage stuff on their own. Like I was always this person that I was trying to do things that I can, or like do whatever, like solve problems. Solve problems.
Especially I think with the Ukrainian mentality, resources are limited, and people cannot afford pay for the services here and there. So I feel if you come from Ukraine, for example, the mentality is let me do by myself as much as possible.
Correct. Yes. So well, I'm excited, honestly. About the way that there can be help and there can be hope in in people's lives to just resolve stuff and be free, whatever. I think it's hard to go farther if like there's like a bag of I don't know how to say it,
cement, rock,
but something holding you back, right?
Yeah.
And the feeling of hope, it's just gets you excited, so
Yeah. See, I just wanted to add briefly that just by me filing a power of attorney on the client's behalf, the IRS already sees that the client is taking some sort of action. So even doing a small step of filing a power of attorney as a representative for the client, in the eyes of the IRS, it's just that small step is positive. Even before getting into seeing what is owed for how many years, filing those non-compliant years and negotiate, even just that small step is already a big breakthrough, because you actually took the first step. And usually the most difficult thing in breaking through those cognitive dissonances and cognitive blocks is to take the first step. You see, especially for me in business right now, my mantra lately has been the imperfect action is much better than perfect inaction. So you see, we can always talk ourselves out of something.
Yeah.
But taking the first step is crucial, because when we take the first step, then we take further steps. But usually the most difficult path for people to break inertia, to get out from the 80% of bees into 20% actively productive bees, is to take the first step.
Yeah. So just like for people, hey, get started where you are.
That's
There's gonna be a different reality when you're just doing the first step, basically. And whatever, like your life could look different when you start with a small baby steps. So there's a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, it's like one of the quotes is, when you're clear, when you narrow down your vision and you're clear in what you want to do, the entire world, the universe conspires to help you, because you have clear thinking, you have like pathway thinking, you have goal, and you have hope that you will achieve it. All of a sudden, you get rid of these emotional blocks that keep you in the perpetual state of procrastination and inactivity.
Yeah. Sounds great. Okay, I have a couple more questions, if you mind.
Yeah, sure.
Why you decided to provide like those services, and let's say what is the main administrative remedies for you, like for tax resolution, and also for Maria, like in
judicial remedies. Yeah.
Yes. So what's the difference? What's the connection?
Yeah. So you see, the situation is when the COVID crisis hit, the government injected like huge amounts of cash into the economy, both to individuals and businesses. So what happened? There are a lot of deficits on the federal and state levels. So now the government wants to recoup those budgetary deficits. So then what happened in August? There was unprecedented law. It's August of last year, August 2022. The government passed a law called the Inflation Reduction Act. And the impetus of that act is to provide different tax credits to encourage sustainable energy production, and also allocated 80 billion for related to modernizing and upgrading the Internal Revenue Service. 40 plus billion of that, around 45 billion of that 80 billion, is going towards strengthening the enforcement action of the IRS.
Okay.
Which means there will be more audits, and like the audits generally happen either on the high income spectrum or the low income spectrum.
Yeah.
And in the low income spectrum, with the workforce, with employee workforce credits, the government wants to audit that to make sure that the person or family had the eligibility for the workforce credit. That's on the lower income spectrum, but also on the higher income spectrum, we know that the Biden administration said explicitly the people and families making more than 400K a year are the ones who would be subject to more enforcement action. So we see the legislative and the overall macro environment components when the government is going to step up the enforcement action in order to replenish and decrease the budgetary deficits, and it developed a mechanism through this Inflation Reduction Act and $80 billion of financing to the IRS. And today, for example, I was walking to the office and I see some sort of protest by the hospital, and I'm asking a guy, what is the protest about? And he's like, I don't know, like probably the union dispute with the employer, but I don't know why they protest in front of the hospital. So I approach people and I see the people like have like pots with some utensils.
Old school.
yeah.
Okay.
Burying the pots. So I asked one lady, what is the protest about? And she's like, well, we are protesting against Governor Hochul. And I said, what you like? What's the issue? She goes, the issue is that she wants to remove 700 million from 700 million going towards Medicaid people, and she's going to leave the gap, Medicaid gap, for people who cannot afford hospital services. So that money was meant to be as a reserve for hospitals to provide for the destitute people who cannot afford it. The Governor Hochul wants to remove that 700 million. So that's what the hospital employees across New York City are protesting and encouraging the people to call Governor Hochul to call off that initiative of removing that 700 million. So you see, like, what does it show us? It shows us budgetary deficits.
Yeah,
the governments
layoffs are everywhere right now. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, the governments are struggling. So the Governor Hochul is thinking what she can adjust. She wants to adjust the 700 million, but it causes the backlash from the people. So you see, going back to those trade-offs, the government helped during the COVID. Now he's trying to get it back.
Yeah.
But how is the government going to fund all those programs? Through taxes, right? Especially as we talk about higher enforcement rate by the IRS. So that's why Mariia and I felt that this is the right time to go into this business, because first, we are passionate, and second, the macro environment, legislative, the COVID help, and now related budgetary deficits cause a situation where these tax resolution services are very needed, because the IRS, state, and municipal, like in New York City, has its own tax system. Like in this case, like 3 levels of government: federal, New York State, and New York City has its own tax system. So like on 3 levels, you can have enforcement actions going on in disputes. So then your question was, what are administrative remedies?
Yes, correct.
Administrative remedies can be things such as installment agreement, where you restructure your payment with the IRS or the state or municipal tax authority, or partial installment agreement, or currently non-collectible. It all depends on the analysis of the assets and disposable income of the individual. So upon that analysis, what the IRS is interested in seeing is reasonable collection potential, or RCP, based on the current disposable income and assets. Once they get that idea, they can determine whether this candidate would be a good candidate for the offer in compromise. And funny enough, only about 20% of cases can qualify for that offer in compromise. Which just goes back to, remember we were talking 20% of active Bs on any given time?
Yeah.
So you see, even
that's correlation happens there. Yeah.
Yeah, even here it seems to hold. But you see, the IRS is not a charity agency. They're not just going to reduce your liability. They're interested in getting revenue for the government. So only in limited circumstances, as they said, maybe 20% of cases or so would qualify for the most advantageous solution, which is offering compromise, which is also known settling pennies for dollars.
Yeah.
Somebody owes like 100K and he ends up paying like 5K or 10K or something like that, like big change. In most cases,
you really need to fight, right?
yes, you really need to present the case correctly and well to make a compelling case to really show that in this client situation, based on his assets and disposable income, there is no way he can ever scramble that huge amount. So in that situation, the IRS says, okay, let's settle it because it's better for us to get something than not get anything and chase this guy forever. The guy cannot make it based on assets. What's the point? Let's settle on something.
Yeah.
But again, as I said, maybe 20%. So it's not, see, like, I'm not advertising some fairy tale scenarios. They're like, oh, like I can settle everybody case pennies for dollars. You know, a lot of people are skeptical of this business because there are a lot of charlatans and fraudsters out there, and they would say, oh, surely we can settle your case pennies for dollars. Just come to us and we'll resolve it. But as I said,
It's impossible, right?
The truth of the matter is limited number, like 20% or so.
Yeah.
Only limited number of cases can qualify. For other cases, as I said, we can still do something.
Yeah.
Installment agreement, partial installment agreement, currently non-collectible status. So we can still negotiate and arrange something.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean, like in the ideal scenario, it would be that offering compromise would be accepted by the IRS and approved, and but you're just giving people a realistic understanding of what they can look for.
Hey, thank you for your honesty.
Yeah.
Honestly, it just shows that life, has different things, different like colors, and but there's still things that we can do to get it better, get it, out of the
bind of the IRS, like choking you. Yeah.
Exactly.
See, and then your second question was judicial remedies. That's on Maria's side. Like my wife Maria is a lawyer admitted to the tax court. So since she's admitted to the tax court, if I cannot solve it through administrative remedies, negotiate some settlement with the IRS, state or municipal authority, then she can fight it out in the tax court. And she as a lawyer, she will follow the steps to lodge the case with the court, and then essentially we get into the situation called uncertain tax positions or disputable tax positions. So in the IRS speak, for the position to have any merit, it should be at least 20%. 20% basis. You see, we go back to the 20%. At least 20%. 20% probability of being sustained on its merits in the court. That would be that would be called a reasonable position. If it's less than 20% of the position being sustained on its merits in the court, the position would be considered frivolous. And if the expert is good, he's not even going to take a case to the court if he thinks that the tax position is frivolous. And then if you wanted to have a substantial authority position, that should be at least 40% probability of the position being sustained on its merits in the court. So it's case by case analysis, and the most common answer in the tax field is it depends. Somebody asks you a question, the most common answer is depends, because it's so facts and circumstances specific. You really got to look carefully through the past non-compliance, the statute of limitations, collection statutes, really assets, income, analyze all of that. First step, get the client in compliance. Then first you review the situation, all these statutes and things like that, get the client in compliance, and only then can you negotiate something. If you cannot succeed administratively, then Maria can fight it out in the tax court judicially.
Yeah. That's a lot of things, I think just for the purpose of being mindful of time of our listeners as well. So there's a lot of things to talk about in the future, but thank you for educating us in this field, because I honestly I feel edified even by just understanding and diving into this topic, but there's a lot of things to discover even more in the future. But let's just maybe close, and maybe do you have something to close off?
Yeah, sure. So I think the like one of the books I'm reading right now is Peaks and Valleys by medical doctor Spencer. So what he's saying that our life is like peaks and valleys, and both are natural part of our life.
Mm-hmm.
What usually happens when we're in the valley, we get so upset and frustrated. We say, oh man, how come I'm in the valley? We start shaming ourselves, we start beating ourselves up, and really begrudge the fact of being in the valley. However, a cool thing about that, we go into the valley to get supplies to prepare for our peaks. So the basic premise of the book is, whatever we do in our valley, the lessons we derive, our attitudes, will determine our peaks and how long we are in those peaks. Usually fear holds us longer in the valley than we are supposed to be. Then on the other hand, when we're on the peaks, our arrogance, we get too prideful, we say, I know everything, I don't need to hear to anybody else, I figure it out. And then we start wasting resources. And then what happens? We are back in the valley because we were foolish, we made foolish choices. But the point is that both valleys and peaks are important and are interconnected. We've got to cross the valley before we can get to the peak. So in the tax resolution scenario, if you guys find yourself in the valley because the IRS is choking you, and you're thinking, it's so unpalatable, and I don't really want to be here. However, you can use this as an opportunity to propel your growth. Eventually, you get out of this bind, and then you start working on value generation and asset protection generation. Two words in this business are defend and protect. So that's what our focus here, to defend you. You won't even have to speak with the IRS, and protect your assets like the beeswax has a protective function, be it for hair, strengthening hair, or the car, we put the beeswax in the car to protect the car from the outside elements. So defend and protect. So the idea is, do you guys know like when we have a straight line, no peaks and valleys? So when you look at your cardiogram, it kind of goes like in peaks and valleys. What happens when we have a straight line?
something is not going good, right?
Yes.
Well,
so it's like we were talking about this.
Sad life.
So we were talking about the bees. The bees works really hard and then it dies. Then to be straight line. Other bees have to step up. So like the call to you guys is to create this sensible vision for yourself. Really imagine what it would mean for you to have this problem resolved, to get it off of your back, to regain that peace of mind, to regain that enjoyment of life. You create the sensible vision, you can get out of that valley and you can keep on defending and protecting your assets or grow your assets and value generation. But the key is to get past that inertia, that 80% segment of the bees, get into the 20% segment so that you can solve it and then you can move on to your next goals. Because, okay, we have like goal, pathway thinking, hope, we achieve one goal. Once that's clear, the major obstacle in this case, the major value, then we can reach other peaks, work on financial planning and preserving and stewarding your resources and finances.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, thank you, Vasyl. It's been a great time to talk to you today, and thank you for for your time, our listeners, your listeners. We'll catch you in next time.
Yeah, like cool. Like I was telling Vasyl, like one of my favorite expression is cool beans, but because we're doing a bee dance podcast, we're saying cool bees here. So cool bees, guys.
Cool bees.